Faith is resistance.
First, they convince you that freedom is impractical. It's a nice theory, but it's just not realistic. Then they convince you that freedom is insensitive. I love liberty, but, I also love people. Then they convince you that freedom is immoral. You're being selfish by putting your individual rights before this person's pain. Then they convince you to sacrifice your freedom on the altar of the greater good. That's the new morality. They say, give us the power to legislate your behavior and dictate your decisions. We promise to use that power in a way that benefits everyone. You can trust us. We know what's best. And then they go and destroy the world. And then they put the blame on you. And they say, this would have never happened if you had just cooperated sooner. If you'd just given up those silly freedoms sooner. It's your fault for being so selfish. And then this cycle is repeated from age to age, with each new generation being duped into believing that authoritarianism was the sort of thing that could only happen to people 100 years ago. But no. It's here and it's alive today. That was from T.K. Coleman. How is freedom lost?
Faith is resistance.
As history has graphically demonstrated, the various religious crusades to immanentize the eschaton, which means to realize heaven on earth. These crusades are deadly serious. This truth is tangibly evidenced by the atrocities committed by the socio-political utopians of secular Gnosticism. Both Auschwitz and the Soviet Gulag are products of the same movement, of the same jihad. The secular theocracies that have waged this jihad have consistently been scientific dictatorships that were informed and edified by Darwinism. Inevitably, the Gnostic myth of Darwinism guides its adherents to the same conclusion. Evolution is going to require man's assistance. Through societal intervention, sociopolitical utopians believe that humanity can facilitate its own evolutionary development and eventually bring their own heaven to earth. Freemason and Darwinian apologist Thomas Henry Huxley said this: social progress means a checking of the cosmic process at every step, and the substitution for it of another, which may be called the ethical process. Now pay attention to this part. He says, the end of which is not the survival of those who happen to be the fittest, but the survival of those who are ethically the best. Who decides who is ethically better? By what standard? To make such a determination requires an agreed-upon standard of morality. This model rejects morality as transcendent truth and replaces it with pragmatism. Whatever works to fulfill our agenda, whatever works to bring our version of heaven to earth. So, here's the question we want to talk about today. Will you be approved? Will you be allowed to survive? Most people will have to work or serve one of the few dozen or so corporations that will remain after this big reset. But the only corporations or large-scale employers that will remain will be those that are fully integrated into the new social utopia. Now, if the average man is going to survive, he's going to have to earn acceptance into the new order. So how do you get the job with one of these few companies, corporations that will actually be allowed to operate? Well, you have to pass through the filter. One like Lucien Tarnowski has created to show that you are ethically approved. We'll talk about Lucien Tarnowski here in just a moment. We've introduced him here before. We'll introduce him again so that you'll know who he is, because his message is extremely important. Not many people know who he is. He's one of the young bucks of the World Economic Forum, but you're going to have to pass through that filter. Who's creating the filter? Who's going to decide who gets through? Who's going to decide who gets to participate in the society? Who's going to decide who gets to survive? There's a lot of unknowns doing this kind of work. So recently I went out and applied for some jobs. You just have to be ready. You have to have a plan B. I experienced the process of being assessed for jobs requiring no interaction with the public. For jobs unloading trucks and stocking shelves, the assessments were deeply psychological in evaluating practical ideas such as how well do you work with others, that makes sense, but also highly formative in that you can see where it's headed. Some of the questions were already in there, and that it's nudging us toward social justice or toward approval to participate in society at all. They want to vet you very carefully before they bring you in. You must be loyal to the party. Nudging it towards social justice or approval to participate in society, these filters will serve to weed out anyone who is not supportive of the utopian order. So to be approved, one must buy into the utopian ideology. Or if you don't buy into it, then you're just going to have to lie. You're going to have to pretend to support it. Those are the options if you're going to participate. If you're going to go down to the grocery store and buy your food. If you're going to be able to pay your rent. But, either will work. You can be a true believer or you can just lie. It doesn't matter. Since the whole system is founded on lies to begin with, it doesn't matter whether you actually believe it, as long as you say that you do, and you put on the correct face, put on the correct front of approval before the corporate gods of this age. Think about this. Think about the early Christians in the Roman Empire. They weren't persecuted for worshiping Jesus. No, they were persecuted for not saying Caesar is Lord. It's okay to worship Jesus if you wanted to, but you also had to honor Caesar as Lord. To be kicked out of society or get a beating or death, all you had to do to avoid all of that pain was to lie and offer that pinch of incense to Caesar openly in front of the guard and the people so everyone knew. Didn't matter if you meant it, just as long as you did it. In the new world workforce, it's not about one's skill level or ability to complete the task. All that can be trained. The question is, are you ethically acceptable to be employed? Are you approved for survival in this new order? Not everybody's coming to the future, so they say. Are you willing to compromise your integrity and lie for a sense of security? A false sense of security, for sure. Are you willing to violate your own conscience to receive the sacraments of the new utopian order? Now that's where we are. That's what it looks like out there today. These things are happening. It has never been more important. Brothers and sisters, Christian, it's never been more important for you to be with other Christians. We need each other today.
Armor of truth.
In the age of technocracy, scientism, and pop atheism,
Faith is resistance.
Nietzsche, of course, announced the death of God and called for the birth of the Übermensch, the Superman, who would take humanity to new heights and to create a new world order.
Find us at the Brad from Carolina YouTube channel and log on armoroftruth.net.